And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
I'm from Missouri. That's all I know.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. This is the conclusion episode of Insect-Based Diet. I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to going back to our normal format, and honestly, I am too. This has been fun, but 2 series in 1 year is definitely difficult. My guest this week is a podcaster who has a great show that's on every week. Yes, the guest this week is me. I'll go into all of that in just a moment, but before then, let's go into our fact of the week. A serving of a palmworm beetle can have as much as 36 grams of protein. Like other insects, beetles supply calcium and iron as well as a good dose of zinc. The exact amounts depend on the size and variety of beetle you're eating. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that is gross, I'm never going to eat beetles. Closest that I've ever come to seeing a beetle on a plate is probably Men in Black. And I don't think I would personally ever eat any kind of bugs, but then again, who knows? Of course, I know I can't eat crickets because I'm allergic to shellfish. And as we all learned from our last episode, that's just not going to happen because they are related to the crustacean. And I wouldn't be able to do so. So, with that, let's kick off Insect-Based Diet, the conclusion. So you might be saying to yourself, okay, well, this is fine for humans, but what does that have to do with my dogs and cats? Well, kind of like with plant-based, there has to be an alternative to what's going on with our pet food. Obviously, with a lot of us who are raw feeders, we have taken it into our own hands and been able to take on a different approach. But consider it. What if we actually added more plant-based and insect-based into regular pet food? That's what really got under my skin, and I couldn't get it out. I did a great deal of studying on this and noticed crickets, great source. We found out that there's a great amount of insects that are actually edible. And the UN has urged the world, hey, look, we got to come up with an alternative. We have world hunger, we have a great deal of problems. Oh, wait a second. We actually have a massive problem with pet food. Now, I've talked to a few people who declined to actually go on the podcast because this is an amazingly crazy idea. And trust me, I get it. They believe in it, but even in 2018, we are still not really there. Now, other parts of the world, they eat insects, no big deal. In America, not so much. One of the funny parts about doing this podcast is that I was contacting restaurants that were insect-based only. To my surprise, there were a few of them that have closed down. So I was really shocked. I was actually really, really shocked. I spoke to one right before they closed down, and they were going to go on the podcast, but obviously this had been looming, and they just didn't get back to me. I spoke with a really interesting person that they really was into the idea of doing this podcast, but I think it's one of those, nobody wants to put their names on anything right now. Being that it is still something that and it really does shock me, brand new and not common, not really something we're doing, they don't want to really come out and say it. It's kind of one of these little groups that, yes, there are farms that are coming up, but it's really, really, really quiet. And I find that to be quite interesting as well. Talk to a few people that are in the science community who actually do the study of all of these different things that are well educated and way more qualified to talk about this than I am. And they said, yeah, there's been a few. There's one in Texas that kind of came up. But again, like everything else, we're not actually hearing about it. It's almost as if we're content with having everything the way it is. But the problem is, with having everything the way it is, we're in a short supply. And I think that that's really easy to say. We have a great deal of waste, and it just doesn't make sense. So back in 2013, when the UN actually urged this and said, hey, look, we need to do something, that's how it all began. And of course, as you saw, Autonomo, they became part of it. We've seen Jiminy's come into this. We've seen a great deal happen, but again, I'm sure a lot of you, just like I am, didn't know anything about this. Which, of course, then brings into mind, why are we not doing more with insect-based and dog and cat food? Let's actually go and listen to what the UN had to say.
Peckish? How about trying one of these for lunch? And why ever not, says the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. According to them, 2 billion people around the world are already supplementing their diets with high-protein insects. I eat insects like this because they provide nutrition. They nourish the body. They're not too fatty, but have lots of good ingredients. If you eat these all the time, you will rarely get sick. The FAO wants to see an increase in the production of edible insects in developing Asian, African, and Latin American countries where malnutrition is a serious problem. While most edible insects are gathered in forests and fields, UN experts said it'll be easy to get insect farming up to an industrial scale.
Tastes can change, and we've already seen insects showing up in restaurants in some of the capitals in Europe, and they're offered there as something like a specialty. So in the longer term, I think insects could also be eaten in Western countries.
A number of insects are rich in copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, selenium, and zinc, and are a good source of fiber. Some of them, such as certain beetles, ants, crickets, and grasshoppers, are thought to come close to lean red meat or broiled fish in terms of nutritional value. And to those who turn their noses up at the very thought of putting an insect into their mouth, connoisseurs say they're an acquired taste, and point out that some caterpillars in southern Africa and weaver ant eggs in Southeast Asia are considered delicacies which can command high prices. Tom Santorelli, BBC News.
5 years, Tomo, Wilder Harrier, Jiminy's, some farms, but still, not much has changed. And the only thing that has stayed the same in these last 5 years is the quality of pet food. Pet food is still exactly the way it has been for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and so on and so on. And that's kind of what really has gotten into my brain and stayed there. I can't believe that this is the right way. This is the way we should be feeding. Now, again, for anybody who's a raw feeder, we've taken it into another direction. We've taken this on ourselves. We put it on our own self and said, hey, you know what? We're ready for a change. But I'm not really talking about for people like us. I'm talking about for all the pet parents who are still without the aha moment. The ones who are still saying kibble is fine. And I understand one thing that has changed for me over the last 4 years of doing this podcast is I understand that life is busy. And raw feeding can be a little bit time consuming. You have two options. You can go out and source everything yourself. It's time consuming, but at least you know what's in your dog and cat's food bowl. Or you can contact a service. That's why I always have a person that I believe in, a friend of mine, which is Troy Allison, and that's why his commercial is in the very beginning of this podcast. It's not for any reason except for the fact that I believe in him. And when I believe in somebody, I'm right there, champion at their side. Here's your options. You can find an outsource or do it yourself. But the problem is, we still have millions of pet parents that are okay with kibble. And I personally wonder if we added insects instead of slaughterhouse waste to food, how would that change the actual food itself? We already know it's high in vitamins, we know it's high in protein. Okay, so we already know it's cheap. So instead of having slaughterhouse waste or bakery waste or mass amounts of starches and sugars, and we were actually using something in air quotes organic, how is that going to make a difference? And personally, from the research, it's going to make a great deal of a difference. I go back to plant-based, and I still stand behind plant-based diet. Not as a stand-alone though. I don't see how it can be a standalone, but I can see how plant-based and insect-based can marry and become a superfood for dogs and cats. Can it actually be a dry kibble? I don't know. Again, I'm somebody who is just putting it together. I'm putting this whole thing together for all of you to kind of ponder. I'm not trying to actually make my own crazy blend, but I'm wondering, what if? And again, having a podcast gives me the freedom to do so. It makes me wonder, hey, is it possible? Can we actually marry plant-based diet, insect-based, put them together to make a superfood? Now, something else that drives me insane, and it goes into the same category as ugly vegetables. We have a great deal of waste that goes on, not in America, not in Canada, but in the world when it comes to ugly vegetables. Majority of farmers have to actually make mulch and waste a great deal of vegetables that, again, can be sourced. I look at all of this and go, okay, we have ugly vegetables, fresh, good vegetables that are going to waste. We have insects that could be going in as proteins, minerals, vitamins, etc., etc., etc. We use plant-based. We can make something at very low cost. And, because, of course, let's be honest, big pet food is all about the dollars. It's all about the money here, folks. So, let's say we take these three components. They become the new realm. Now, I know somebody is probably saying, then what are we going to do with all the waste? That's a good question. But let's stop dividing all of the garbage, putting it all together so that we can make a, air quote, food for our furry loved ones. It doesn't make sense. It is pointless to harm a dog or cat just to be able to clear a path with all of the slaughterhouse waste. Now, am I wrong on this? Maybe. But it's something that really drove into my brain of, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So, I wanted to actually go into the next clip, which is going to be about ugly vegetables.
Fruits and vegetables come in every shape and size, just like people. And the weird-looking fruits and vegetables taste just as good as the perfect-looking ones. Unfortunately, supermarkets reject the produce that doesn't look perfect. That leads to 6 billion pounds of produce being wasted on farms every year, which is more than 20% of the produce grown for human consumption in the US. What if you could live in a place where perfectly edible fruits and vegetables are not only saved and enjoyed, but available to purchase at affordable prices? I'm Ben Chesler, an Embark Fellow from Brown University.
And I'm Ron Clark, former manager of Farm to Family.
And I'm Ben Simon, founder of Food Recovery Network. And we're working hard right now to launch a new venture called Imperfect, to find a home for these unloved fruits and veggies and to offer consumers a chance to buy low-cost, great-tasting produce straight from farmers.
We work with farmers to source their ugly produce, like these carrots here. A supermarket would normally reject these carrots for being a little wonky looking, but we source them from the farmer along with other fruits and vegetables, so you get a box of seasonal, ugly produce delivered to your door every week. And because this produce looks a little funky on the outside, you get it for 30 to 50% less than what it costs in a supermarket. And you can feel good knowing that by eating Imperfect, you're helping to reduce food waste and protect the environment from the greenhouse gases that rotting food emits. We're launching our service in Oakland and Berkeley this July, but we need your help to make it happen. We have a goal of reaching 2,500 customers in the first year and keeping 50,000 pounds of produce from going to waste. We have to make initial produce orders from farmers, and we have to lease a refrigerated warehouse to store these fruits and vegetables. So we're asking you to chip in whatever you can to help us reduce food waste and make produce more affordable for all people.
So the question is, why aren't we? Are we worried about the science? Because I think that in the last 3 episodes we were able to prove the science is there. Is it cost efficient? I think we've been able to cover the fact that it is actually probably cheaper to actually do it this way for big pet food. So by using ugly vegetables, by using insect base, by adding plant base, would it improve big pet food? And then I'm just the guy on a soapbox right now. That is all. I am standing here on my soapbox saying, what if? I'm not the guy that's going to go into the lab and put it all together. But I can do one thing, and that is I can give you guys all the facts. And again, a lot of you are all in the same place that I am, and that's what makes it great, and that is you do what's best for your dogs. You do what's best for your cats, and you want the best for them. You want to make sure that you're doing the best. I'm curious how many of you would actually be willing to put your dogs and cats on an insect-based diet. Something that actually had all of the essentials. Because personally, if it was formulated accurately, I would. I'd be curious to see, with the high levels of protein, the high levels of vitamins and minerals, all that I know my dogs and cats need, what would it do? Knowing they're not eating wheats and grains. So I don't have to worry about an allergy for my dogs and cats. I don't have to worry about large amounts of starch, sugar, garbage in their food. That's where I've drawn to my conclusion here.
We are all here based on the fact that this is real, that this is important, right? We don't need to be convinced.
According to the UN, global food production has to increase 70% by 2050 in order to feed our growing population. And without changing the way that we produce food today, that's just impossible.
The hunger issues and the waste issues and our broken food system and all the things that relate to that have gone beyond the point of being shameful to the point that it's criminal.
80% of our water goes to agriculture, and over half of that is watering feed for livestock.
Put down everything. Like, put down your smartphone. Everyone stop what you're doing. Just stop. Let's figure out our water and our food. No, whatever you're doing is not as important as our water and our food.
Anything that can help us solve those problems and return balance, health, and wellness to our food system, or supply food to the people who need it the most, to not take advantage of those things is playing the ostrich and sticking our heads in the sand.
Entomophagy is the act of consuming insects, ingesting insects.
We've been killing bugs, let's eat them.
I mean, this is an air of inevitability about it. Continue global devastation, eventually make food out of bugs.
They use extremely little water, and we raise them in volumetric rather than planar space.
High levels of B12, iron, calcium, magnesium. In many ways, they're nature's perfect food.
I just ate a roast. It tastes like chips. Great.
They live in cattle. They don't eat it.
Cricket protein bars, cricket powders. They don't have to see the whole animal.
Our mission is to create a world where insect protein is seen as a viable alternative.
They saw dollar signs in their eyes, and you could hear the ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching as they thought about edible insects.
The gateway bug.
The gateway bug? The gateway.
It's astonishing.
Future food. The menu of 2030. The world's population has been increasing faster than food production, even with modern agricultural technology. There will be 9 billion people to feed by 2050. Researchers have been looking at new food sources, tweaking existing ones, and even creating entirely new foods. We examine what could be on our dinner table 20 to 30 years from now. Critters. A 2013 UN Food and Agricultural Organization report reminds us that there are 1,900 edible insect species out there, that some 2 billion earthlings already regularly consume: beetles, butterflies, moths, bees, and locusts. Insects are abundantly available and rich in low-fat protein, fiber, and minerals. Lab meat. Scientists came up with synthetic meat grown in the lab. As early as 2013, scientists have already cultured ground beef from cow stem cells. Although that lab patty cost $330,000 to make and tasted quite bland, experts predict it will only take a decade or two for an affordable product that looks, cooks, smells, and tastes like ground beef. Algae. While it is already used as a biofuel, algae is seen as a solution for the problem of food shortages, as it can feed humans and animals alike. Algae is the fastest growing plant on Earth and has long been cultivated in Asia. Food experts predict algae farming could become the world's biggest crop industry, as it can be grown in both the oceans and in fresh water. It is a good source of vitamins and minerals. Farmed fish. 3.5 billion humans today depend on the oceans for their primary food source. That figure will double in 20 years. Fortunately, humans are aware of this and have implemented sustainable commercial fishing practices and turned to cultivating fish. Aquaculture is going big, with 35 countries producing more farmed fish than fish caught in the wild. A milestone was reached in 2011, when for the first time, more fish were farmed than beef, a trend that has continued. GMO chow. Genetically modified food is nothing new. We first re-engineered the DNA of plants in the 80s to make them disease-resistant. By the 90s, GM foods were commercially available. Several food items we consume, fruits, crops, livestock, even fish, have undergone some sort of genetic modification. These are generally safe and went through strict standards. 3D printed dishes. Straight from the printer and onto the plate, you will be able to fully customize food shapes, textures, tastes, and forms. You can order online your favorite chocolate bar or snack and 3D print it with a machine at home. The food you're craving will just be a print away.
With that said, I don't think that I will actually be having myself an insect-based diet, but why are we not? And I guess that's where this whole thing concludes of why aren't we? We know that it's sustainable. We know that it's possible. Now, it's for the future to go from there. And I really have enjoyed doing this series. I really have. Again, stressed out about doing it and concluding it and making sure that all of you were able to take something away from all of this. Hopefully, I was able to strike something in your brains and you all kind of now think, why aren't we doing insects in our foods? Obviously, we could do it for human. We can do it for our dogs. We can do it for our cats. And I know a lot of people were really upset with the whole plant-based because they said that the proteins and everything else wasn't there. And like I said, from throughout this entire episode, and that is, it was inconclusive. And we don't know what the long term is. But we do know that there is the alternative, and here it is. So I want to just leave all of you guys with this, and leave comments, send me messages. I'm definitely wanting to open up the line of communication with this, and I really enjoyed making it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to it, because I really did make it for all of you. And as much as I enjoyed the research, I really worried about putting together a really good series for all of you. So with that said, I'm Chris Green. Have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.